Good of you to turn out on a Sunday morning, particularly on one of the rare Sunday mornings when it's not actually raining on us. But hopefully you'll get a lot of information, hopefully controversy, and things to think about over today's conference. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to the event. And when I came to think about the Scottish Parliament, where I came from was that election night in 1997. I'm sure you all remember it. After 4 consecutive Tory wins, the sheer joy of seeing them defeated. And for a few hours, that joy masked the fact that we're actually getting a new Labour government in their place. It was a government, obviously, a long way from what we'd hoped for. It was, however, at that stage inevitable that there was going to be a Scottish Parliament, or at least a referendum on a Scottish Parliament. I remember being in George Square after the 1992 election when the Tories had secured a majority in the UK, but actually only got half as much support in Scotland as they got for the average in the UK. And the feeling of anger and resentment there was at that event against the Tories that had given us Thatcher and the poll tax. That sense of we never voted for them created a momentum for the Scottish Parliament that wasn't an abstract concept about identity so much as a concrete rejection of the economic philosophies adopted by the Tories that was bit by bit destroying the manufacturing heartlands of Scotland. Not only did it put people out of work, but then demonised them for being without paid employment. The Scottish Parliament was established by New Labour with the clear intention of keeping it weak. And I think that that has run through the 12 years of its existence. It was structured, as they thought at the time, to ensure that no party could get an overall majority. And while it developed responsibilities for some issues, it kept what perhaps is the most strategically important issue of fiscal policy to itself. Further, New Labour tried to ensure that amongst its own MSPs that there would be no possibility of an alternative power base to Donald Dewey's control developing. It rejected potential candidates who might have had the experience and the confidence to form an alternative power base. And because it couldn't achieve an overall majority, it ran its members with a tight discipline that ensured that they would always support the government of the day. Despite this, there was in the early stages of the Parliament some examples of the potential it could have had. And I think very much of Tommy Sheridan's Pinding and Warrant Sales Bill that was supported by Joanne Lamont and others. And that idea of a coming together cross-party for issues that affected working people could have been a way of the party operating, the Parliament operating, but that isn't what happened. The result of that, I think, is the chickens are, as they say, coming home to roost when they look around now in the Labour Party elected members for a leader, and really nobody stands out. Nobody has achieved that recognition because they have stood up for working people in the Parliament. I would say, other than a few comrades who are not considered senior members of the party. What I think we recognise now is that if we're looking at new powers for a Scottish Parliament, we need to think about, in some cases, where is the power coming from? Some of that is actually coming from Westminster, but some of it is also being taken from local authorities. So I think we need to perhaps explore that issue as to the impact of Scottish Parliament on our local authority system, and what are the implications in the debate perhaps between national standards and local democracy. If the Scottish Parliament gains more power, one thing I think we'll agree on today is that these should be used to lead the fight back against tax injustice, to defend jobs and services, and to safeguard welfare rights. The question the conference is asking today is, how can power be devolved not simply to a bureaucracy, but to empower working people? We've learned from the experience of the Scottish Parliament that this involves more than just geography. A parliament, just because it's based in Edinburgh, does not ensure that it's more responsive than one based in London. It is not geography that achieves a more representative government, it's whether that institution is responsive to the electorate. The most important factor is not where the Parliament is situated, but how it's made accountable. And those, I think, are the issues that we'll be looking at in some detail today. We've got a busy day, so I'm going to get on as quickly as I can and introduce the speakers that we have in this morning. We're going to take them in the order that they're in your programme, and we're starting with Graham Smith. Graham, as you all know, is General Secretary of the STUC, and I think for him quite an interesting experience of being the first General Secretary to work under an SNP government. The STUC has, of course, a long history of leading and supporting workers in struggle, including the Scottish Assembly convened in 1971, which both supported the ECS struggle and asked the questions that we continue to ask here today. What is the best means of giving a voice to working people in the fight for jobs and democracy? I'll run through and introduce all the speakers now, and then we'll come back to Graham. The next speaker will be Patrick Harvey, MSP, a Glasgow MSP for the Green Party, first elected in 2003, and thankfully, I should say, returned in the two subsequent elections, even when the fate of other smaller parties wasn't as successful. When it comes to divisions in Parliament, we can be sure that Patrick will be in there voting the right way, or pressing his button. Lynn Henderson took over the Scottish Secretary of the PCS at a time of unprecedented attacks on its members. I'm sure since the very day she took office that she's been totally committed to working for her members to save jobs, defend terms and conditions, and to protect the services they deliver. What Lynn does is ensure that PCS is part of the wider political and trade union movement, which supports with its support for the Better Way campaign and the People's Charter. And the last speaker this morning will be Richard Leonard, Political Officer, GMB. Richard is someone who advances political thinking in the Labour movement. His articles in the Morning Star, and I'm pleased to say in the Citizen, ask the important questions and offer a rallying cry for a different type of politics, and for real power to the people. I should say that I'm Pauline Bryan. Forgot that. I'm editor of The Citizen and a member of the Campaign for Socialism. So we'll kick off today with a contribution from Graham.